Okay, so now we'll move to Chapter 14 when we're still dealing with the organizational level, which is structure and design, and we'll look at some of the learning objectives there. We want to define what organizational structure is, and in terms of organizational design, we're going to describe relationships between different managerial decisions around organizational structure. We're going to discuss relative advantages and disadvantages of centralizing or decentralizing authority within an organization. And we're going to look at mechanistic and organic designs of organization, and we'll understand why virtual organizations tend to become more popular in today's global society. When we look at organizational structure, it's defined by the patterns of jobs and groups of jobs in an organization. It's an important cause of individual and group behavior. Some of the concepts around organizational structure is the structure has a tremendous amount of influence on behavior. The features of the organization that control or distinguish its parts, and all organizations have different structures of jobs. A structure is a recurring, I don't know why they actually say recurring activity, but structure is integral to how an organization proceeds. Without predictable activities, the work of the organization could not be done. There's an emphasis on regularity and persistence of activities when we look at organizational design. Management decisions and actions that result in specific organizational structure are also part of organizational design. Managers decide how to divide the overall task into different similar or dissimilar jobs. It's used as the basis by which to group jobs, and we look at the appropriate size of jobs and how authority is going to be distributed among the different jobs and divisions. We said there were 4 key design decisions, and these are displayed in this particular chart, where we look at the division of labor, and we look at whether we have really specialized jobs or whether jobs are very broad. We look at whether we have departmentalization on the basis of how diverse it is or how similar the jobs are. We look at the span of control between how many people are supervised, departments, divisions, or how few. And we look at the delegation of authority between how centralized the organization is or how decentralized the decision process is. When we look at division of labor, we're really talking about how we divide work into different specialized jobs in order to achieve different advantages around specialization. It can be it can occur by dividing work into different specialties. We can look at different activities based on the sequence of work and how it's performed in order to achieve performance outcomes. And it can also be done along what we call a vertical plane of the organization. When we look at departmentalization, we look at the process by when an organization is structurally divided and combining jobs into some sort of shared characteristic or basis into different departments. When we look at organizational charts and organizational designs, we see these departments based on the function of the job, maybe the geographic location of the job, particular products and services that we have, who our customers are, and we have what we often call a matrix organization where they combine some of the functions with some of these other things like product or customer. When we look at a functional basis, jobs are combined according to the function of the organization. So when we do this, it really leads to efficiency, and we have departments that are specialists in order to create efficient units. One of the disadvantages of a functional basis is we might actually not be able to achieve our organizational goals as efficiently when we're so focused on one particular type of function. This is an example of a functional basis when we look at maybe a banking institution where we have a division of departments of a loan area, an investment area, trust area, and they don't really interact with each other, but there may be some similarities in actually who their customers are and how the people that they relate to. In a geographic basis, we actually look at establishing groups or divisions around geographical location. So if we have a customer, European customer, or South American customer, we actually divide our organizational structure into servicing those geographical areas. Some of the advantage in large organization is physical separation of activities makes it difficult to centralize any kind of coordinated effort of management, and we can actually kind of meet the customer more on their particular training ground for managerial personnel if we can send them around to different divisions. When we look at product, We might, all jobs associated with producing and selling a product or a product line are under the direction of one manager. An example of this could be the auto industry, where we have, the truck division, the SUV division, and so forth. And so what we have is all authority, responsibility, and accountability for all trucks at the top of the organization. So we might have duplication of effort because we might have somebody in a product area that could also do the same thing in another product area. The product becomes a preferred basis as a firm increases the number of products in its markets, and you need managers and leaders to be on those particular products. Here's an example of a department basis based on product. So you can see we have the whole functional area of controller, marketing, personnel, and then we have them divided by product, like whether they're going to have different hygiene products, household products, commercial products. This would be like a Procter & Gamble type of organization. We also might divide our organization on the basis of how we best serve our customers. We might have organizations that say, hey, you have all these nonprofit organizations, or you have all the profit-making organizations. Or we might have all the telephone companies or department stores be a customer for maybe a technology company or something. When we look at matrix organizations, we look at how we can actually combine function and product or service and get the best of them. We'll talk about that later, how some of the advantages and disadvantages of how it allows for flexibility but creates some kind of confusion among employees and work outcomes. Here's an example of a product organization where you have different functions, manufacturing, marketing, and so forth, and you have products, and you bring in people from those different functions to work on those products or projects. And when they might stay there for that length of time, and the only problem with this is they also might be reporting to two managers. Some of it might be finite, some of them might be ongoing. The span of control is the number of individuals who report to a particular manager. And this shows up in organizational design too, whether 5 people or 10 people. They do say that a reasonable amount of span of control is having the maximum of 7 people reporting to you that might have 7 different types of job responsibilities. You might be a leader or manager of an organization that has multiple work teams that all do the same thing, and they all could report to one person, and whether you had 25 of them or not. But the complexity says it probably 5 to 7. Deciding on the span of control is influenced by how much contact you need, how much specialization there is, and how easy it is to communicate with the managers of these different divisions. Here's an example of a wide span of control where these supervisors have many. You can see here that there's 7 in each one of the different divisions reporting to a supervisor. When you have a narrow span of control, you can see there's only 4 that report to a supervisor that report to a department head. So the department head only needs to deal with 2 people instead of 8 or 9 people, and it could or could not make it more efficient. It really depends on the outcomes of the organization. We also have a delegation of authority when we look at how central or decentral the organization should be. In distributing authority downward, managers need to decide how much authority to delegate to each job and to each job holder. Remember, information and decision making is power and also can lead to job performance outcomes. Some of the benefits of decentralized authority could be if you're really trying to develop managers' skills and capability. It gives them a lot more empowerment to make decisions and help lead the organization. It can also lead to a competitive climate, which can actually improve productivity. Managers can exercise more autonomy, and that could actually help improve some of the problem solving so it isn't so concentrated at the top of the organization. We can also have a delegation of authority where decisions to decentralize often follow some of the experiences that happen with centralization. Oftentimes you'll see a very decentralized organization that gets into financial trouble move towards more centralized structures. When we do have a centralized authority, managers must be trained to make the decisions that go with the authority, and this can be very expensive to have a manager have that much accountability. They're also accustomed to make decisions. They may resist delegating authority, authority, which can reduce effectiveness, and that could be another reason to centralize. In terms of decision guidelines about whether you should centralize, some of these things that you could ask yourself if this is an issue that is starting to face your organization is how routine and straightforward are the decisions for the job or the unit. If they're pretty straightforward, you can probably centralize. How competent are the individuals? If they're not very competent, you'll probably want to centralize. How motivated? If they're not very motivated, you might want to centralize. And do the benefits of decentralization actually outweigh the costs? So, in terms of, we talked about organic and mechanistic models. Henry Fayol, who in your book talks about different management principles dealing with management functions of organizing. Remember, we talked about planning, organizing, controlling, and leading. So in terms of organizing, how specialized, emphasizing the technical, not necessarily the behavioral dimensions, how the grouping of jobs is done by specialty or not, how much authority we assign to people in order to get the jobs done, and the chain of command, the vertical communication, how wide or narrow it is in an organization is part of a mechanistic model. Max Weber coined the term bureaucracy, and his model of bureaucracy has been studied by many in sociology and business. It applies to a particular way to organize collective activities. He believed that organizations, in order to be effective, needed to have some of these characteristics, that tasks needed to be specialized, that they needed to be performed by systematic rules to make sure that they were uniform and coordinated so that there was consistency, and there needed to be accountability to everyone within their job. He also, his organizational characteristics, that employees relate to each other in more of an impersonal manner, that their jobs are based on technical qualifications, and once they're in a job, they should be protected from just arbitrary firing or dismissal. The mechanistic model has very high levels of production efficiency because of it, how structured it is. It's very complex due to the specialization of emphasis on labor. It's very centralized due to the emphasis on high authority and accountability. And it's very formal, where it's due to the emphasis on function of the organization as a basis for departments, not necessarily product or service. Moving to the organic model, the organic model really wants to look, we could probably relate this to saying more, task-oriented versus employee-oriented. And in an organic model, we seek to achieve maximum satisfaction and flexibility in development of our workforce. When we have flexibility to change the environmental demands, it encourages more utilization of our human resources and doesn't make them so mechanistic. There's more decision-making control and goal setting, and that's shared across all levels of the organization and owned by them. And we have more communication that flows up and down throughout the organization and not just down from the chain of command. The organic model is very simple because it has a de-emphasis on job specialization and more on job range. It's decentralized, so there's an emphasis on delegation of authority and more depth in jobs that we discussed in the last chapter. And it tends to be more informal. It's due to the emphasis on product and customer relations as a basis for how an organization is structured. You can see the difference here on these many different processes. On leadership, motivation, communication, and interaction, we see many differences between the mechanistic structure and the organic structure. You might want to review this in your book as you go through in the differences in decisions, how they set goals, how they have a span of control, and their performance goals. We've been talking about some of these as we've been going through, and this is a good summary to refer to in trying to understand some of the differences between the organic and the mechanistic model. Moving to contingency designs, when we say, hey, we're going to design an organization based on a particular situation, where we want to fit the design to the demand of the situation. And this might be what kind of technology we have available, what kind of environment we're in, and also it might be management choice. You might see that organizations that do a lot of business with certain clients, they tend to structure their organization based on the structure of their clients. This is another example of sort of a contingency model. The essence of this approach is to really take a look at under what circumstances and situations we might decide to have a mechanistic or organic model based on which is more effective. When we're talking about technology, one thing we need to understand is technology can be defined many different ways, not just things that we touch like computers or or TVs or something, but it's really actions that an individual performs on an object with or without the aid of tools or mechanical devices in order to make some change in this object. And that really is how we look at technology. Organizational structures reflect technology in ways that jobs are, we see the division of labor and we see how they're grouped. The knowledge regarding actions to change an object in technology can be a constraint on management. So how we use computers, how we use robots, how we use other kinds of tangible resources. It has increased the state of knowledge exponentially and made management actually even more complicated. There was a study done by Joan Woodward about technology and organizational design where they were trying to determine if there were structural differences between firms that were more or less effective. The overall results were that there was no significant structural differences or patterns found, but the outcome of their research showed that technology actually made a significant impact on the productivity of an organization. Some of the variables that were measured included, and you'll see this in our next graph, the stages in the development of production, the relationships between the equipment used for these processes, and the extent to which the operations were repetitive or comparable from one production cycle sequence to the next. So you can see here, it's not your typical sort of continuum model. On one end, we have custom design job orders where we want a certain job done a certain way, and then we have a continuous improvement process on the other extreme. If you notice that there is an increasing use of technology, but you will see that on the two ends we have flexibility. You tend to have more of an organic design, a lot of communication in the organization, a lot of integration, but we actually have an organizational design that's oriented towards mass production where we're producing a lot of product all at once. It allows for more centralization of our organizational design, and when we do that, it's less flexible, it's more mechanistic, it tends to be more formal. There's less span of control in terms of what happens in structures and processes. So the conclusion of her research was that different technologies impose different demands on the organizations, and the demands have to be met using appropriate structure and processes, whether it's centralized or decentralized. Another study by Lawrence and Lorsch that's in your book, they studied plastic and food and container industries, and they looked at the environmental demands on the organization. And they tried to determine which environmental elements would determine whether an organization needed to be centralized or decentralized. In the differentiation, the degree among organizational units was due to individual and structural differences. So employees of some departments that are more or less task or person-oriented, employees of some departments have more longer or shorter time horizons about how getting work done or what their careers are, and some employees were more concerned with the department as opposed to their organizational goals. In terms of integration and the environment, achieving unity among the various subsystems during the accomplishment of organizational outcomes, there needed to be stability of the environment in order to determine methods for integrations used. So the key reason to differentiating into subsystems is to deal more effectively with those subsystems. So they didn't really have an outcome that they were particularly clear about, except that it depended on those subsystems. And these included the market, the technical economic situation, and the scientific level that they were involved in. Some of the sub-environment variables included the rate of change of conditions over time. How fast was it? How slow was it? How certain information was about the conditions, and how quick the feedback came in the results of the decisions that employees made. You can see here in terms of an integrative subsystem of Lawrence and Lorsch is you look at the market subsystems, the technology subsystems, and these were all dependent on marketing, production, and research. One of the things we also have to take into account, we've been talking about the U.S. economy moving more from a post-industrial environment to more service, and this requires more looking at how we have optimal performance. And improved performance is based on in service, like environmental uncertainty, and the customer attributes, because in services we're more concerned also about our customers. And we want to take a look at the demands from our customers, or what they're, how diverse they are in terms of what they expect out of our products and services, and how willing are they to participate in the delivery of that service. Do we partner with them, or they just expect a delivery of that service without much interaction? This leads us to talking about adaptive design strategies, where organizations receive, process, and act on information to achieve performance. So it's kind of almost like a continuous improvement, total quality management process. Information enables the organization to respond quickly to market and environmental changes. They're able to do it quicker. In firms that have a mechanistic design, information processing usually is modest because the chain of command is so controlled. And firms with organic design usually are able to exist in more dynamic, complex environments that tend to require them to be more adaptive. In terms of Sociotechnical Systems Theory, production processes are a combination of social and technical dimensions, and they have a reciprocating influence on one another. So we have more optimization both on the technical and social behaviors when we have a system that kind of takes a look at the technical aspects in the organization and the behavior and social needs of the people involved. This has led also to the idea about total quality management, where we look at having zero defects, controlling variances in the product, and trying to be consistent as possible in what we do. One of the things we talked about in our learning objectives in the beginning of the chapter was how we create virtual organizations. And this is where we establish a network of cooperative relationships with many groups, and maybe they don't house themselves in one particular area, but become sort of virtual and organic. And these are really known as sort of boundaryless type of organizations. These are new designs and strategies that are taking place. eBay is probably a good example of a virtual organization of how so many people can list products and sell them on a different kind of organizational structure.